reading a pamphlet titled Judaism and Bolshevism. And this is an article which appeared in installments in the issues of the Catholic Herald from the 21st and the 28th October and November 4th of 1933. So, a challenge and a reply, some facts. At a meeting held at St. Joseph's Hall, Hanwell, in July last to protest against the Bolshevik persecution of Christianity, the speakers, inter alia, enlightened their audience as to the part played by certain sections of Jewry in the establishment by terrorist methods of the Bolshevik system of government, which is avowedly anti God and in its efforts to destroy the present social system of the world is determined to stamp out Christianity. Mr. L.J. Heidelman, in letters written to the editor of the Catholic Herald, has taken exception to the statements made by myself in particular at the meeting. To him, and perhaps to many others who are unaware of the facts, Bolshevism and Judaism would appear to be contradictions in terms. The association of capitalistic Jewry with anti-capitalistic Bolshevism would seem to be absurd, and the use of Bolshevism, Zionism, and international finance, the money power, by a small and powerful section of world Jewry as a means of gaining world domination are to be classed as somewhat wild conclusions. The Jews and Bolshevism. Bolshevism is a Jewish conception based on the teachings of Karl Marx and other revolutionary socialists. It is characterized by destruction and chaos and imposes its will and maintains its power by terrorism and murder. Bolshevism is, above all, anti Christian and anti social. For until the existing order has been destroyed, the so called dictatorship of the proletariat in a universal brotherhood of nations cannot be imposed upon the world. There are many who would keep the public in ignorance of the part played by Jews, whether socialists, communists, Zionists, or financiers, in the events which have led to the destruction of Tsardom, to the enslavement of the Russian people by terrorism, and to the imposition of the Jewish controlled Bolshevik regime, to the post war Red revolutions in Europe and Asia, to the economic and industrial war on capitalistic states conducted under the 5 Year Plan, to the unchecked persecution of Christians by Bolsheviks in Russia, Spain, Mexico, and elsewhere, and to the rapid spread of Bolshevik activities throughout the world, in particular in Palestine, the Middle East, India, and China. Within the limits of a short article, it is only possible to give a fraction of the overwhelming amount of evidence from authoritative sources, both non Jew and Jew, in support of these facts. The following instances, however, should serve to convince your readers that Bolshevism and Zionism are but means to an end, weapons in the fight by a Jewish world power for supremacy in politics, economics, and religion that is the fight for Jewish nationalism, posing as internationalism against non Jew nationalism. Bolshevism officially attributed to Jews. The British government published a white paper, Russia number one, April 1919, in which was contained a report from M. Oudinnik, the Netherlands minister at St. Petersburg, who was watching British interests during the Bolshevik Revolution. Mr. Oudinnik states, quote, I consider that the immediate suppression of Bolshevism is the greatest issue now before the world, not even excluding the war which is still raging, and unless, as above stated, Bolshevism is nipped in the bud immediately, it is bound to spread in one form or another over Europe and the whole world, as it is organized and worked by Jews who have no nationality and whose one object is to destroy for their own ends the existing order of things. Unquote. This report, dated September 6, 1918, was forwarded by Sir M. Findlay from Christiania to Mr. later Lord Balfour. Incidentally, the above passage was deleted from a subsequent abridged edition of the said white paper. The following facts demonstrate the part played by Jewry in the furtherance of Bolshevik activities. Number one, the hostility of both capitalistic and socialistic Jews to the Tsarist regime is a matter of history. According to their own claims, the Maccabean, New York, 1905, the Jews were the most active revolutionaries in the Tsar's empire. The Jewish banker, the late Jacob Schiff, of the powerful banking group Kuhn Loeb and Company, aided Russian revolutionaries. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, 1925, Jacob Schiff financed Japan against Russia in the war of 1904 to 1905. Number two, Jews engineered the Russian Revolution of 1905 and 1917. From statements made by Sokolow, the Zionist leader in his book, The History of Zionism, and by other Jews, it is apparent that organized Zionism played an important part in Bolshevik activities in Russia. The success of the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution was made possible by the financial support and influence of international Jew financiers. Vide the Sisson Report, published by the American Committee of Public Information, 1919. The Times, February 9th, 1918. Number three, statesmen representing the Allies in 1919 endeavored to secure the recognition and representation of the Bolshevik government at the peace conference at Versailles. Wickham Steed, editor of The Times, at the period of which he wrote in his book, Through 30 Years, stated regarding this move, quote, the prime movers were Jacob Schiff, Warburg, and other international financiers who wished, above all, to bolster up the Jewish Bolsheviks in order to secure a field for German and Jewish exploitation of Russia, unquote. Number four, international finance, which is Jew-dominated, found abundant credits for the five-year plan. Krassin served as one of the post-war links between Jewish and other finance and the Bolsheviks. The intrigues by which financial credits apparently made to Germany reached Russia have been denounced in the USA, Congress, and elsewhere. The statements have not been refuted by the German-American Jew bankers thus implicated. Number five, that there is some alliance between the Bolshevik leaders, the avowed enemies of capitalism, and the world's supercapitalists must be inferred from the fact that Felix Warburg in 1927 was given a royal welcome to Russia in spite of his association with the Federal Reserve Bank of America and with the banking group of Kuhn, Loeb and Company. The Bolshevik government in Russia is in actuality a Jewish government. The Soviet movement was a Jewish and not a Russian conception. It was forced on Russia from without when, in 1917, German and German-American Jew interests sent Lenin and his associates into Russia, furnished with the wherewithal to bring about the defection of the Russian armies and the overthrow of the Kerensky provisional government, which was quote unquote pro-Ally. Thus, number one, the movement has never been controlled by Russians. For A, of the 224 revolutionaries who, in 1970, were dispatched to Russia with Lenin to foment the Bolshevik Revolution, 170 were Jews. B, according to the Times of 29th March 1919, Of the 20 or 30 commissaries or leaders who provide the central machinery of the Bolshevik movement, not less than 75% are Jews. Among the minor officials, the number is legion. C. According to official information from Russia in 1920, out of 545 members of the Bolshevik administration, 447 were Jews. Number 2, the benefits of office under the Bolshevik regime have been reaped by Jews. The number of official appointments that have been bestowed upon Jews during the Soviet regime is entirely out of proportion to their percentage in the state. The population of Soviet Russia is officially given at 158,400,000, the Jewish section, according to the Jewish Encyclopedia, being about 7.8 million. Yet, according to the Jewish Chronicle of January 6, 1933, over 1/3 of the Jews in Russia have become officials. Number 3, anti-Semitism in Russia is now classed as counter-revolutionary and is punishable by death. Number 4, it is significant that the red five-pointed star, which in former time was the symbol of Zionism and Jewry, is now the symbol of the Russian quote-unquote proletariat. Bolshevism, Judaism, Christianity. Bolshevism was enforced in Russia by means of confiscation, terrorism, and murder on a scale of unprecedented magnitude. According to Bolshevik figures and other estimates, in the revolution, some 20 million people lost their lives, either by violence or from starvation and disease. Of these people, some 1,766,118 persons had been executed before February of 1922. The terror has become a permanent institution by which the Bolshevik Jewish government maintains its tyrannical power over the enslaved millions of Russia and pursues its war on religion. These statements may come as a shock to many readers, both Christian and Orthodox Jew, who may have condemned the activities and actions of the Bolsheviks without realizing where the true responsibility lay. They will be further disturbed to read from the Jewish Chronicle of April 4th, 1919, quote, "There is much in the fact of Bolshevism itself, in the fact that so many Jews are Bolsheviks, and the fact that the ideals of Bolshevism at many points are consonant with the finest ideals of Judaism," unquote. And from the Jewish World of March 15th, 1923, quote, "Fundamentally, Judaism is anti-Christian," unquote. An expression of opinion which is by no means new to the Jewish world, for in its issue of February 9th, 1883, there appeared the following, quote, "The great ideal of Judaism is that the whole world shall be imbued with Jewish teachings, and that in a universal brotherhood of nations, a greater Judaism, in fact, all the separate races and religions shall disappear," unquote. Wow. Bernard Lazare, a Jew, in his book Le Antisémitisme, asserts, page 350, quote, "The Jew is not satisfied with de-Christianizing, he Judaizes. He destroys Catholic or Protestant faith. He provokes indifference, but he imposes his idea of the world, of morals, and of life upon those whose faith he ruins. He works his age-old task, the annihilation of the religion of Christ," unquote. The whole persecution, torture, and murder of Christians by Bolsheviks in Russia and elsewhere would therefore appear to be the logical and practical application of the above ideals, as foretold by Wilhelm Marr in 1879 and by Dostoevsky in 1880. Many Jews deplore the participation of members of their race, even though they may be professed atheists, in the unbridled acts of destruction, cruelty, and devilry which characterize Bolshevik tyranny. In an attempt to explain away the fact that Jews play or played leading parts in the perpetration of the hideous crimes of the Bolshevik terror, Alfred Nothig, one of the spiritual leaders of Judaism, states, quote, socialism and the Mosaic Code are not at all in opposition. All Jewish groups have a vital interest in the victory of socialism. They must exact it, not only on principle, not only because of its identity with the Mosaic doctrine, but also on tactical grounds. The Jewish socialist is reproached with playing a leading part in the communist terrorist party. This is only explained by two reasons: the complete estrangement of the Jewish terrorists from the spirit of the Jewish doctrine, and the strong mixture of Tartar and Cossack blood that has inculcated in them savage and cruel principles. That it is note, the reader may not be aware that the Eastern European Jew, known as the Ashkenazism or German Jew, is of Jewish, Mongolian, Turkish extraction. The Western European Jew, known as the Sephardim or Portuguese Jew, is regarded as purely Jewish in origin. The alliance between international finance and its proteges, Bolshevism and Zionism. The European War and its aftermath dealt staggering blows to Western Christian civilization. By contrast, however, international Jewry has emerged therefrom with enhanced financial and political power in all parts of the world. Through the use of the money power, international Jew finance is now able to direct the internal and external policies of the governments of the impoverished states of Europe and also of America. By this power, it has forced non-Jew governments to further the political aspirations of Zionism and to refrain from protecting the interests of their own nationals from the activities of Bolsheviks, who are now undermining the economic, social, moral, and religious systems of all states. International finance is not altruistic. It never seeks its own material advancement and power. Europe is exhausted as a profitable investment, but Russia, Siberia, the Far East, India, the Middle East are awaiting exploitation and would offer colossal gains to those who could superimpose upon them the mass production methods of modern machinery. Bolshevism has opened the way to a Jewish industrialization of Russia and Siberia. It may deliver India and the Far East into the hands of international Jew finance. Its part is to foster world revolution and the destruction of religion so that the present social system may be swept away as in Russia. International finance, after the success of the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, which Zionists had aided, realized that it stood greatly to gain by supporting the Zionist movement, by forcing the Balfour Declaration, or a financially harassed British government, and thereby consolidating world Jewry into a world political factor for use in their own interests in world affairs. The Zionists themselves later in 1928 realized that their movement had been exploited by international finance, and in 1929 did not hesitate to say so. For at the dictates of powerful Jew financiers, the Zionist organization as the official liaison between world Jewry and the mandatory power for Palestine was superseded by the Jewish Agency, a body containing powerful non-Zionist elements. International finance, by its support of Zionism, has obtained the power to exploit the vast resources of oil, chemicals, and other substances in the lands to which Palestine is the outlet. By the same means, it has dumped into Palestine, the most sacred country in the world, thousands of Bolshevik Jews who would destroy all religions and who, from this strategic center, are engaged in propaganda designed to draw Palestine, Egypt, the Middle East, India, and the Far East into the gigantic movement begun in Russia and to destroy British imperialism. The part played by international finance in furthering Bolshevism is a source of bewilderment to those who do not understand that the money power, Zionism, and Bolshevism are but weapons in the hands of international Jewry. On the face of it, astute Jew financiers, with their knowledge of mankind, would not be so stupid or so insane as to pour vast amounts of capital into the worldwide activities of Bolshevism unless they were certain in their own mind that their own interests and power were secure, whatever happened to the rest of humanity. The alliance between Jewish finance and revolutionary movements was no mystery to Disraeli, Lord Beaconsfield, for just after the European revolutionary upheaval of 1848, he wrote, quote, "The influence of the Jews may be traced in the last outbreak of the destructive principles in Europe. An insurrection takes place against tradition and aristocracy, against religion and property. Destruction of the Semitic principle, extirpation of the Jewish religion, whether in the Jewish or the Christian form, the natural equality of man and the abrogation of property are proclaimed by the secret societies who form provisional governments, and men of Jewish race are found at the head of every one of them. The people of God, well, that's not true. The Jewish people cooperate with atheists, the most skillful accumulators of property, ally themselves with communists. The peculiar and chosen, not chosen race, touch the hand of all the scum and low caste of Europe. And all this because they wish to destroy that ungrateful Christendom with which over owes to them even its name, and whose tyranny they can no longer endure." And that's a quote by Life of Lord George Bentinck. Similar statements have been made by many other writers of eminence and erudition. History shows that the Jew has always been by nature a revolutionary, and that since the dispersion of his race in the second century, he has either initiated or assisted revolutionary movements in religion, politics, and finance, which weakened the power of the states wherein he dwelt. On the other hand, a few far-seeing members of the race have always been at hand to reap financial and political advantage coincident with such upheavals. In the present case, however, world Jewry may have let loose a force of destruction which international finance may find itself powerless to control. In fact, another Frankenstein monster. Is the whole Jewish race to be condemned? Dr. Oscar Levy, a Jew in 1920, in a letter which has been printed as a preface to his book, The World Significance of the Russian Revolution, by G. Pitt Rivers, attributes the fact that, quote, "Jewish elements provide the driving force for both communism and capitalism, for the material as well as the spiritual ruin of this world, to the intense idealism of the Jew," unquote. However, as he points out, all Jews are not financiers, Zionists, or Bolsheviks. Dr. Levy considers that the Jews have most grievously erred. Quote, "We who have promised to lead you to a new heaven, we have finally succeeded in landing you into a new hell. I look at this world and I shudder at its ghastliness. I shudder all the more as I know the spiritual authors of all this ghastliness, but its authors themselves are unconscious in this as in all they are doing. Unquote. It may be true that the fanatics who have committed the many and only too well authenticated facts of destruction and devilry are not fully aware of all that they are doing. For Bolshevism is but one of the several weapons employed by a small and very powerful group of men who lust for world domination, to whose prototypes Christ pronounced the following indictment. Quote, ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. John chapter 8, verse 44. And whose existence in these days has been referred to by Jews of such eminence in politics and finance as Benjamin Disraeli and Walter Rathenham. This small group of men, Jews, has long exercised a hidden dictatorship over the affairs of Europe, America, and to some extent in Asia by means of the enslavement of national governments to what Herzl, the first leader of the Zionist organization, called, quote, our terrible power of the purse, unquote. This method of control could not be applied to Tsarist Russia. Therefore, the end was achieved by means of Bolshevism, a method which is also being used to bring the East into subjection to them. The machinations of this group of men have been crowned with so great a measure of success that members of their race have no effrontery in their recent representation of Britannia to attach the seal of Solomon to her shield and the Judaistic symbol of the serpent around her trident. And the descendants of those who rejected Christ have not only joined hands with Antichrist, but also with those who would expel God from his universe and set up in his place gold and the machine as symbols of their gross materialism. Unless the power of this section of Jewry is checked by human or superhuman means, the peoples of the world, whether non-Jew or Jew, are doomed to slavery of body and soul.